You're going to get through this.
Easy for this. I was able to do it.
Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of cats.
That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me.
That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to One-on-One Shadow Boxing. Today we got, again, Paul Whitfield from the City Bible
Forum, that's right, yeah.
Forum. Today, the topic is environment. I have to go back a little bit with time and Christianity to the beginning when we got Jesus. Jesus was a lucky guy. He can walk on the water, environmentally friendly, you know. Then he can multiply the fish and the bread for the people who is invited for a party. If we can do that, we can be really sustainable. But instead of that, Christianity, who has taught us lots of good things and became the pillar of the Western society and the culture, Christianity let run down the world and preferred to greed and sacrifice the environment on behalf of greed. Why has that happened? What's your comment?
I agree that a large part of the problems we're facing with the environment is due to greed. So the Gulf oil spill a couple of years ago, the White House published a verdict on what had happened and said that, they pointed out that the decisions that had led up to the Deepwater Horizon spill, they didn't necessarily say that there was intent to this, but they just observed that the decisions that led to that spill had saved BHP, Halliburton, a lot of money and a lot of time. And I think for us living in Western Australia, we might not be living by the seas of the fertile Lake Galilee, full of fish like Jesus was, but we are living on top of 1 trillion cubic metres of gas, which the Gorgon project is working to extract. Our mineral wealth in Western Australia is vast. And I think there's also the temptation for us, instead of exercising restraint in the way that we care for the environment, for us to just be overcome by greed. And I think Christians over the centuries have been, we've fallen to greed many, many times. And I think the lesson of history is that we can't just treat the environment however we want to and think that there won't be consequences.
Some of our scientists are saying environment is something which we could not preserve just because it's changing anyway. Science is split, not on the changes, because we're acknowledging changes happening, no doubt about that. But what is the influence changes, or how can we save ourselves rather than stop the changes?
Yeah.
So
I think
what's the answer in here from the Christian point of view?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a climatologist, but the consensus amongst climatologists is on the cause, that the majority cause is human behaviour for current climate change. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN's body, has released its 5th report this year, and it says they're 95% certain now that the majority of climate change is due to human activity.
Like blowing up the atomic bombs and the hydrogen bombs in the atmosphere, which we've done for more than 10 years
Yeah,
before.
I think that IPCC identifies carbon emissions as the main cause. But you have flagged what is the answer. So if we are the current cause, majority cause of changes to the environment, what will be the solution? Well, I think you're right, that there isn't necessarily the same consensus, and the Earth over millions of years has been going through a process of snowballing and then ice sheet retraction. We're in an ice age at the moment because there's ice caps at the North and South Pole, and we are in a small snippet of variation within that. So I think there isn't necessarily the same consensus on what's the way ahead amongst climatologists. The Christian perspective, though,
Yes.
is that this is God's world and we're caretakers in it. And so whatever our actions are, we have to take them very seriously. It's not our place that we're warming up.
I thought that was the Aboriginal point of view of life, not the Christian point of view.
It's a view held by a lot of different worldviews. I think on the environment, different worldviews have different approaches. A strict materialism might just see this world as an accident or random, and we just have to make up our own mind about what we want to do with it. So it's all about autonomy. The more traditional approaches have been animism, that perhaps the earth itself is alive, or that there is a creator who stands outside of the universe, and he's the one who gives it meaning and value, and as creatures in it, we're subject to his choices.
Now, issues of environment, after the philosophical things, issues of environment, disappearance of the woodlands. It's just simply greed, practice, or practical outcome of life.
So I think there are emerging economies across the world. Brazil is, that's where most of the deforestation is happening. It's been turned into farmland, which is a process that we've been through here in Australia as well in the past. I think as citizens of Western Australia, citizens of Australia, our first responsibility is to the choices that we make here. We might have ideals about what the Brazilians should do, but our choice is what do we do with our gas reserves? What do we do with our mineral reserves? And before criticising emerging economies, I'd want to notice that in terms of pollution, Australians punch above their weight. Per capita, we're the biggest global emitters. And in terms of the reserves that we sit on, we're one of the richest. Again, we punch above our weight. And in terms of wealth, which we've spoken about previously, we are incredibly wealthy. So we have more choices than a farmer in Brazil does.
A little bit more, but the wealth from Australia is walking away. The wealth is maybe not ending up with Australia. So all these multinational companies are taking the wealth and selling us and selling the reserves, no end.
Australia's ridden three waves. Western Australia in particular has ridden three waves. First of all, on the sheep's back. That was the first economical thing that Australia, it was the first export that we had. The output that made Melbourne and Sydney, for a time, the most wealthy cities in the world. It was the sheep. And then, of course, in Western Australia, we've ridden on the back of a gold rush. And now we're riding on another boom, the China boom. And I think you're right in observing that it's quite a precarious position to be in, to be based on primary industry rather than secondary industry. We outsource our factories to China and India, but the warning signs are there that we can't bank on digging stuff out of our ground and selling it at market prices forever. More than a third of our economy in Western Australia is based on mineral exports. So if the China boom changed, that would be significant for us here.
So we know that we're selling out our resources. Not everything comes back in the terms of wealth to redistribute it. So that's a very sort of un-Christian activity as such, looking at the outcome and the end result of that.
I wouldn't want to say that it's an un-Christian activity to be contributing to the global economy. I think there has been an incredible rise in standard of living over the past generation. Compared with 100 years ago, 75% of the world is living at a better standard than the top 25% 100 years ago. And that's a good thing. Working together, not just as countries, in countries, but across borders, it's a good thing for the human race.
But you said before, Paul, we should just look at first before we pointing the fingers or drawing conclusion. We should look at ourselves first. And this is what's happening in WA. we're selling out. And the end consequence, as you draw the intention to that, is not going to forever, not going to happen forever.
Yeah.
So it's an ending thing.
I'd agree
So-
that perhaps we're not being paid the price by the people we export to that our future generations will have to pay here in Western Australia for our choices. I think that's
what I meant with
Yeah,
the end
but
result as a bit
but because-
unchristian
because you,
for me.
Because you might see imperfections in a system doesn't mean you have to reject it wholesale.
No, we're not rejecting it because we're not in the position to do that, and we don't have the power for it. We don't have even the people to understand what's the danger of it. So, regardless of economists or environmentalists, it's not the main focus. The future, unfortunately, go to the economical side of the environment. The gas and electricity, the price is just rising. It's greed, partly because we think basics have to be treated as business, and we have to sell it and we have to make the profits. So what is thus for the environment, this behavior?
I think energy is an essential service. So I think the government is right to look to provide a safety net to all of the population on the question of energy. You might debate things over whether everyone needs optical fibres going to their homes, but I think everyone needs electricity. That's something that we would like to invest in for every single Western Australian. So I sympathise with choices that the state government's made to try and keep those prices low. But if we want to keep prices low, we do have to look to the future and look at sustainable options. Sustainable options
Yes.
might be comparatively expensive in the short term, but they're certainly better for keeping us going across a few generations, and they might actually be profitable in the long term. I mean, you go back 10 years and the kind of technology that exists in your mobile phone, because they invested money in developing batteries, was Star Trek. People would not have imagined it. And if we invested heavily in sustainable energy, who knows what could happen? It's exponential what could happen in the next 20 years.
On that note, Paul, we have to go to a short break, but please stay with us because after the break, we're coming back with more discussion with Paul about the environment.